So, beginning our Star Trek, we're going to look at the Prime Directive. And it's funny because of the two things I'm going to look at, it's the one that I think I like the best, but the one that I think works the least. We'll get into it in a second.
And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob, the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is...
Star Trek and the Prime Directive. Star Trek is that perfect future where everything works out and humanity has risen above and beyond all of its pettiness. And the Prime Directive is all about one of those ways that we teach not to interfere. Hey, look, just because you think something's right doesn't mean that everyone should. And it's such a great concept in theory. But before we go into that, let me just quickly say what I do here is I analyze stories, I come up with theories on how and why we tell stories, and then I review stories as well. If that sounds interesting, you can subscribe. If that sounds really fun, you can help me out by becoming a subscriber. Either way, we're going to start off this talk with Star Trek. Alright, so throughout the series that I watched, which were the first 5 of them, what the Prime Directive really did was create a false sense of drama. It created a moment where, psychologically speaking, you, the audience, were given a little bit of a test. Do you follow the rules and do what's right, or do you do what you know to be right, and that means breaking the rules? Now, over the years, each individual part of the Prime Directive has been re-explained and reimagined just a little bit. But the basic part is that you shouldn't interfere with other species and other societies, especially those that do not yet have the capability of space travel. So it's kind of like, well, gee, why is it that you shouldn't interfere? Well, because you being more advanced gives you a leg up. It puts you in a realm of authority. And as part of that authority, you should not be dictating how and why people should do things. And I think Gene Roddenberry really liked this idea. But we see that it's not always the way the show went. And yes, I know Roddenberry was not directly involved in First Contact. But I want you to think about what First Contact actually represented. Not just the movie, but the event. The Vulcans already had something like the Prime Directive. They said they wouldn't contact pre-warp civilizations. Zephyr and Cochrane managed to make a warp ship. And as such, the Vulcans came down and said, hey, you're ready to spread out into the galaxy. Welcome to the neighborhood. Except for the fact that they were still a super advanced society. Like, where is this arbitrary line? The fact that they have a warp drive? But I mean, come on, the Vulcans are already well above that. And we can see in future episodes of Enterprise that these advanced technologies that we run into give us advanced technology too. And that we can back engineer things. So once we start looking at other civilizations, do you really want to start saying, well, it's wrong at this point? I mean, any sufficiently advanced technology is magic, right? So okay, going back in time to the 1400s with modern computers and an iPhone that works might just look like magic. But realistically, would an advanced iPhone from 10 years from now look like magic to someone that had an iPhone too? Probably not. It would just look, wow, that is a lot better. And we see that there are times that they have to disregard the Prime Directive. Why? Because there are lives on the line. But there are also examples of times that they choose not to. And sometimes they're a little wishy-washy on this. But I want you to think about why they're wishy-washy. Because again, this comes down to getting to the real heart of the storytelling that I'm interested in. What does the Prime Directive serve? Well, before we delve into what it means in story, let's go back to what I said it means out of story. Remember I said it's a false drama? Yes, I like it. And I cannot stress enough that I like it. But it's a false drama because it is a set of rules I don't think any of these captains ever followed. And yes, I know there are more captains now, but I haven't seen them, so I can't really comment. At the end of the day, yes, we've seen Janeway and Archer and Cisco and Picard and Kirk all pay lip service to the Prime Directive. But we've also seen them break it, because that is what it's really meant for. It's meant to be a test for every single character. Do you want them to break the rule this time? And the drama comes down to, will they? And I want you to think about the fact that if that rule didn't exist, how much easier it would be on the characters. They would just have to say, well, what's the right thing to do? Instead of weighing what's right with what is following the rules. So, especially when you realize that there are some times, and even the real world, this happens all the time. Hey, wait a minute. The thing I know to be right is against the rules. So then what? Well, you have to make your choice. Do you follow the rule or not? So they created a rule that they purposely knew would create these situations. When I imagined doing this episode, I really thought about going back in and taking one example of each ship or each show and saying this is how they applied the Prime Directive and whether I agreed or not. But at the end of the day, I don't want to micromanage this. I don't want to bend down to one specific circumstance, even though I'm leaving one up on the screen right now. I want to talk in general. And as such, I'm going to create a fake one. But I'm going to create it in a modern society, not a futuristic one. Let's say that you personally, with your phone and your laptop and all of your current skills, found yourself on vacation and you found a tribe that was in no way, shape, or form technologically advanced, and you could communicate with them. And when you did, you realized that they were still at Stone Age technology, and one of them was dying, and you had the ability to save them. Would you? Or wouldn't you? Now, anyone that has any sense of decency would probably say, of course I would save the person. But then you need to think, how are they going to see someone who can save someone that can't be saved? How would you see someone who came down from nowhere and all of a sudden saved someone who couldn't be saved? My bet is you would probably think of them rather religiously. And now, that example isn't just out of nowhere. I kind of lied. Because yes, I mean, original series kind of played with it sometimes, and Next Gen a lot. But it's specifically something we've seen on a non-track. The Orville. As we watched an entire religion get developed around the ship and around the first officer. Now, like everything else, the Orville has its own version of the Prime Directive with just the file numbers filed off so that we can have all the Star Trek tropes. So for all intents and purposes, it could be a Star Trek show for this, even though it's really not. But at the end of the day, it handles it rather interesting. Its first officer gets discovered and then treated like a god. And then we have the ending where we find out that, hey, these rules aren't that big of a deal. Because as long as you have faith in science and logic and discovery, gee, I wonder if that was a little jab at discovery, but at the end of the day, people will evolve and follow a certain mindset. So, I mean, in doing so, it actually showed why the Prime Directive isn't necessary. And I don't think the Prime Directive is anything at all natural that we would come up with. And here's why. Let's go back to First Contact. For good or ill, the Federation has always been played as humanity. So, humanity in this world got advanced technology and advanced help from the Vulcans, and throughout all of Enterprise, even when the Vulcans were kind of holding them back, the Vulcans were also introducing them and showcasing and being big brotherly. The Federation was founded on the principles, but at the end of the day, they were founded because of interference. Yes, they pretty much made the rule of not to interfere with pre-warp because pre-warp is this line. But at the end of the day, once you have computers, once you have electricity, once you have an understanding of how tech can advance. Aren't you already pretty much on your way to being that warp civilization then? And why warp drive? Why not replicators or teleporters? I mean, those things really are just pretty much deus ex machina magic that were created for the show as well. Or why not regeneration of cells? Because, I mean, let's be honest, medical technology is far more important than travel technology. No, my opinion is that as a writer, I understand why they came up with this rule. Because it helps the writer force a situation on the characters. It helps us have to ask the question. But at the end of the day, it's not the type of question that I think humanity excels at or that I think humanity would want to ask. In fact, I bet you we would bring technology to everyone. And we would justify it in all sorts of different ways. Because first, we'd say we were improving their lives, even if we were enslaving them. And let's be honest, we don't exactly have the best history on not enslaving primitives. But I really cannot imagine that this rule would just be imposed like this. Maybe something similar, but that's my thought. What do you think? Do you think that the Prime Directive is good as a storytelling tool, or that it's good as a what we should develop? Let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do a reaction video to those comments. But for now, I need you to do all those things that YouTubers ask you to do. So, like and share. If you aren't already, join my Patreon. Of course, if you can't do that, just subscribe. Because even just a little comment or a like will totally help this channel. You know how everyone always talks about those ad apocalypses and stuff. The best way to build a channel is interaction. And even if it wasn't, I just really feel like sometimes I'm talking to a blank screen here instead of talking to you, and I would love to talk to you about this. So I hope you have a good night, and thank you for walking with me through the heart of the Prime Directive. I'll see you in 2 weeks for Section 31.